The Ancient Egyptian Language and Historical Study by James P. Allen. An American Egyptologist, he earned his PhD in Near Eastern Languages and Civilization from the University of Chicago in 1981. He is currently a Wilbar Professor of Egyptology at Brown University, specializing in early ancient Egyptian language and religion. And he has authored numerous books in those areas. But this book dives into more of the history of the ancient Egyptian language, the phonology, the grammar, and how it changed over time. And ancient Egyptian lasted over 3,000 years, and James Allen pretty much covers that in this book. And I should mention, this is not no beginner's guide. Readers should already have a solid understanding of the language. Going straight into the book without any fundamental knowledge of any of the languages would be hard to understand. And when it comes to Egyptologists, scholars who are in the field, they usually have a great understanding of the Egyptian history. But some often specialize in certain areas such as like the pyramids, some specialize in mummification, their religion, their military history, and of course their language. And that what James P. Allen specialized. Now this book is divided by two parts. The first part being the phonology, the study of the sound and the voice, and part two being the grammar. But in the beginning of the book, he goes into the historical overview of the ancient Egyptian language, which is commonly divided into 5 historical stages. In order, one being the Old Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, Late Egyptian, Demotic, and then Coptic. And there's a huge grammar difference between the first 2 languages compared to the last 3. And they are usually grouped into 2 major historical phases, Egyptian 1 and Egyptian 2. These 5 historical languages were mostly being written in at least 4 different scripts: hieroglyphs, hieratic, demotic, and then Coptic, with early writings of hieroglyphs being painted on wood or rocks, sometimes being carved. And you will also see it written on ink as well on papyruses. But the best example I could give is a Rosetta Stone, having 3 different scripts of translations, hieroglyphs, demotic, and Coptic, but in 2 different languages. Hieroglyphs and demotic being an ancient Egyptian language, Coptic being the Greek language. And he specifies the dates of the language first appears in the book. For example, such as the late Egyptian language, it started to appear at the time of Akhenaten, Dynasty 18, I believe that would be 1350 BCE. But in this first part of phonology, he starts with Coptic, the latest stage of the language, and then he kind of works his way backwards. And he specifically goes in detail of each of the languages. He writes the similarities between all the languages and also noting the differences as well. And I didn't even think of this, but during the time they may have spoke all the same languages, there were also different dialects throughout the Nile Valley region. And since Egypt is such a vast landscape, people in the lower Egypt can have different dialects from the ones in the upper Egypt. In part 2, the grammar, he covers more of like the nouns, pronouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, and he goes very deep with it, especially when it comes to their verbal system. You know, ancient Egyptian language is one of the oldest recorded languages in the world. Scholars with this track their linguistic changes over time, offering a window how the language may have changed over time. You know, this is important because we need to know the origins. Some Egyptologists have different views than maybe some other scholars who are in the linguistics field. But when it comes to James Allen books, he states that Egyptian language belongs to the Hamitic family of the languages. Hamitic pretty much means like the ancient Egyptian language is based on the biblical division of Noah's son Ham, with the idea that the language belonged to the descendants of Ham. And he writes about that early in his book, you know, but that term is no longer used and it's outdated. To some people, it could be a problematic or a derogatory word. For the linguistics that are in the field, found no linguistics entity of the Hamitic language. For the word was pretty much used to group the African language together at the time. Modern linguistics rejected the idea, and the term now used is Afro-Asiatic language. Now, my final thoughts, I should mention I have not completely finished reading this book. I just been like selecting certain chapters to read in the book. I've been using it more as like a search engine when comparing it to other books in the field. You know, this area of linguistics can be very difficult, but it tells a lot about the identity movement of the group of people. For it's important for the scholars to use all the research possible. And one thing about these scholars in the field of Egyptology is that they will give their opinion as if it's a fact. There's an Egyptologist, Barbara Mertz, has a quote in her book, Red Land, Black Land, A Daily Life in Ancient Egypt. And she writes, the most reliable ancient Egyptian books are loaded with boring words like probably, perhaps, and possibly. And I did not see none of that in this book. Now, the links are below. Subscribe for more.